Hello, friends. Welcome back. My name is Sarah Varghese, and of course, we know Martha the T-Rex. My business is She-Rex Marketing, and today we are here with Matt Champagne, and we are talking about visibility, and we're talking about how digital marketers kind of get the whole visibility thing wrong. But first, Matt, introduce yourself. Tell us how you got started, what your specialty is, and a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Sarah. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's been a long journey. I started as a professor of psychology at a university where I was trained as a mathematical psychologist. So my area of expertise was in decision making, how people make the decisions they make and how to gather feedback and how to act on feedback. What's the best way to really understand what's in somebody's head? And then along came the internet age. And I caught the bug like everybody else did. I took my 3 smartest grad students and we started a company that actually created the first feedback tools on the World Wide Web for universities and training companies. So I ran that for about 10 or 11 years, finally sold it to somebody who a lot smarter than me that had some business sense and could expand it. Our tools are now used in about 85% of universities, but I've since moved on to become a consultant and help entrepreneurs and those kind of new to the digital marketing field learn, how to use good psychology and use psychology properly to attract and engage and keep their customers forever.
We met at a networking event. We met at a virtual networking event called GEM, Generous Entrepreneurs in Media. And I've just grown to love it. I've only been there twice, but it just seems like a great group of people. And I was intrigued when you said that you design surveys for people, and then that got us talking on a one-on-one afterwards. And then you were telling me about how digital marketers don't always get visibility correct, and it was based on some psychologist or scientist. So can you tell us and introduce us to who that is and what all of that is about?
Sure. So yeah, we talked about surveys because that's an interesting twist. I explain how to do everything with psychology and explain to people how their surveys are not getting into their the heads of their members and students and clients. So I've done that for a good long time, but using the same principles, same psychological principles, I've gone into this area where just focusing solely on that point of decision. So we use surveys before events to kind of get people thinking about our products and services. But right there at that point where they're making a decision, in comes the influence. And that's Dr. Robert Cialdini. His book from 1984 is called Influence. And I introduce people to that book because most people don't know. They know the terms social proof, authority, reciprocity,
Right.
Scarcity, and they know they're supposed to use them. But the original author, Dr. Cialdini himself, said, we're doing it wrong. He has said that publicly. The digital marketers are using these wrong. He calls them smugglers of influence. Not a very good name. He says instead, people should be detectives of influence and use these principles correctly.
So tell me a little bit more about that. What's the difference between the smugglers and the detectives?
Well, one key differentiator is in how you use these as weapons versus levers. So how the digital marketers teach it is as weapons, because that's what he talked about in his 1984 book. He called these authority, scarcity, social proof, all the rest so powerful. He called them weapons of influence. But what happened was the digital marketers took them and said, okay, here's what you do. You hit them with scarcity, and then you hit them with the urgency, and then the social proof. You stack all of these together. And Cialdini said, that's exactly what you don't do. He said, that is what a smuggler does. What you're supposed to do instead is pick the one principle that best represents what you do and use it as a lever to move your people to say yes. So in my case, I often use authority. I say, oh, here's all the degrees on my wall, and I've been doing this for 30 years, and I'm a psychologist. But I don't use scarcity and social proof and liking and all the rest like weapons. You just kind of bludgeon your people into saying yes. You use one. I use authority and say, well, Sarah, I've seen folks in your situation, and this is what's worked with these 550 companies that I've worked with, and I think this will work for you. And I use my authority as an expert to demonstrate that I might have the answer that you need. So I use the one principle to move them. That's a big difference
Yeah.
between a smuggler and a detective.
So I remember I was at a conference years ago, and they taught us the principle of, first you come in with the emotional sell, and you sell them on the emotional things, because the emotional people are more likely to buy like right away. And then the people who aren't buying on the emotional hook, then you come in with all the facts and figures, and you make yourself the authority of all of it. And then if that's still not working, then you hit them with the scarcity right at the end. And so it was a stair step that they were teaching everybody to do. Hey guys, we only have like so many of this left, and the doors are closing at this time. And that just never resonated with me. I never wanted anyone to buy because they thought they were going to miss out and never get it ever again. And even now, when I am signing up for programs and I see people doing this stair step of, you're going to miss out, we're only doing this at one time. And I'm like, but if it goes really well, we all know you're going to do this again. So
Exactly.
it feels manipulative.
Because it is.
Yeah.
And that's the psychology behind it. And what Cialdini's point is, it's powerful, powerful psychology. And when you use them as weapons, as in that approach, you're putting extraordinary psychological pressure on people. And to some digital marketers, they say that's the game, that you get them to that point. What they don't tell you is what I've seen behind the scenes talking to folks who work in these bigger organizations, is the number of people who want their money back after 30 days, the buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
So yeah, you won the game, you scared them into buying, but then they had buyer's remorse. But if you use the tactics, what we call principles, Cialdini's principles, correctly, like levers, there's no remorse. In fact, your people trust you more. They want to buy from you. They see the authenticity that you're showing. Now, there is a way, I guess, to stair step it if it's done over time, if you're having a long conversation, but we don't want to do what we see everybody else do. And in fact, JP Sears, the comedian, mocks this approach where he goes through each step. Okay, here's where you tell your backstory. And here's where you tell them that you're just like them, but you discovered the secret. And then, hey, it's almost midnight. You're going to run out. There's only 6 more of these. He goes through and mocks the whole approach. Yet this is still taught by many of the digital marketers. This is how you sell.
It is. I see it all the time. In the coaching world, in the in all kinds of aspects. You see like, hey, last 10, there's only 10 spots left, and after these 10 are full, like we're booked up. And I'm like, I bet if another person came along though for number 11 and 12 spots, that you'd find a way to get them in if they were willing to pay the same price point that everyone else was. Like, don't sell what isn't true. And then the people, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and don't sell like you wouldn't sell this way if they were in front of you, right? If you go into Target or Walmart or someplace, nobody's coming up to you and saying, hey, Sarah, you like that camping equipment? There's only 3 of them left, and you better buy it now because tomorrow it's going to cost twice as much. Oh, and here's the 3 guys that bought it. Here's what they have to say. Mm-hmm. We would run out of the store if people sold to us in person how they do online, but entrepreneurs, new folks to the digital marketing, they just don't know any better. I didn't know any better. I did the same thing years ago. And then I thought, this doesn't feel right. Like you said, it feels icky. That's what a lot of my clients say. It feels not the way I would want to be sold to, and try to sell the people as if they were right in front of you in a real situation.
Yeah. So, but it's still one of his principles. Scarcity is still one of his principles. So how does he recommend using it that is in a more ethical way?
Yeah, so now it's interesting that scarcity is one of his principles, but urgency is not. So that's actually a good tip for folks, that if you had to choose between the two, you would always choose scarcity because it is a psychological principle. He would call urgency scarcity of time. Okay. But it's, of course, it's a tactic. It's a great tactic if, to get people to say yes that first time before they have buyer's remorse. But scarcity is a principle if there's true scarcity. Yeah. And if there's true demands on your time and numbers of seats and availability, then scarcity is an incredibly powerful motivator. right?
Got it.
Whether, there's shortages going on in the world, people rushing
Yeah.
out and buying things, because we know there's very few of these left. So it's a powerful impact on it. We just have to be careful as detectives of an influence that, one, it's true. And second, is this how I want to sell? Is this the one lever I will use? Or am I better off using authority or social proof or liking or reciprocity?
Yeah. I guess I see it where the urgency of being able to buy into something, if no, really, like, on the other end of it, no, we have to have all the money in by this date in order to book this location, in order to do this retreat with you, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, we need to have it in by this point. Or like time, I only have room in my schedule for 5 clients this month of, this level of service. And after that, I'm sorry, I have to put you on a wait list for right now until something opens up.
And
That
if
makes more
it's true
sense.
scarcity, it really doesn't have to be stated, right? At this
Yeah.
time, where we are now in the calendar, used cars are scarce and homes are scarce. There are things that are truly scarce. So the realtor and the car salesperson doesn't have to say, hey, there's only one of these left. We all know it. And it's a scarce thing. So if you have to convince people that what you have is scarce,
Okay.
it's probably not scarce.
Mm,
It looks forced. And that's what you don't want to do. A good lever to be a detective of influence. It's something that comes naturally. Authority comes naturally,
yeah.
but does liking comes naturally to some people. We've seen those digital marketers who are just so charismatic. They just come on and glow, and you're like, oh, I just want to give this person my money. That's not me. I can't. That's not my my strength. But we each have our strengths, and that's what I help people identify is which one is for you in this particular selling situation, which one looks most authentic and thus most effective.
Yeah. That's fun.
It comes mostly, we do an assessment. My colleague, Mitch Axelrod, and I, Mitch was the one who interviewed Cialdini some years ago. And
Wow.
it's that on that interview that Cialdini talks about smugglers. And he also uses the term bunglers of influence. Cialdini does, people that just don't know the principles. So they miss an opportunity to sell.
Yeah.
So this is what we explain when we do an assessment of people's strengths, is we want to make sure that, they're not smuggling, which most aren't. They're not doing it intentionally, but many are what Cialdini would call bunglers. They don't know.
They bungle it. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you miss an opportunity. It was a chance for you to sell something that somebody really needed, but you didn't have the opportunity. Cialdini uses the example of somebody that's selling tennis rackets and nobody's buying until the salesperson mentions, oh, this is the tennis racket used by Nadal and Federer in, Wimbledon. Oh, why didn't you tell me that? Now I would. So by not understanding the principles, what are those levers, you miss out on these win-win opportunities. So that's what we do in the assessment. We have people walk through their current launches, their current websites, their webinars, their video sales letters, and have them, mark out like, where are you using social proof and how are you using it? How are you using authority and scarcity? And people are always surprised that they use almost all of them. They stack them. And then we explain, how to actually use scarcity in an authentic way. And they realize they're not doing that.
Yeah.
So when you can turn this around and show them, here's how you should use it, here's how you're using it, and pick out their strengths, that's when we get the success stories. Like, okay, it's just a little change. I'm going to not emphasize these. I'm just going to go with this one lever.
Yeah.
And they feel it. They can see that the audience is waiting to hear. They stick on their list longer. Even if they don't buy, they stay with them. And that's what they want. Yeah, not everyone buys on that first webinar, but they don't unsubscribe. They stick around because this looks like an authentic person who's truly trying to help.
Can you walk through the different principles again? So I remember authority and scarcity. What were the others?
So there's reciprocity. There's scarcity, liking. There's two that are rarely used: commitment and consistency. Those are often used in live situations. And then the final principle is called unity, which is new. Cialdini did not include it in his earlier book, but he considers it the most powerful of all the principles. And unity simply means that get people to feel like they're part of something big, that it's not only liking, like Sarah, you and I can like each other because we have
Yeah.
similar interest in things, but unity means like we're in the same clan. It's kind of an in-group, out-group
Yeah.
sort of designation. And you see some marketers do this, like, hey, you don't want to be like those people, you want to be like my tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And if people are in your tribe, if they are, with you, then they are much more inclined to buy. They can be more heavily influenced. So that's a very powerful principle. Again, you can see how that could be used like a smuggler. It could be used in a fake way. But if used in an authentic way, very powerful.
Yeah. I see that that's how people use email newsletters, right? If you can get them inside, or a private Facebook group, if you can get them inside of a smaller community where they're there specifically to bond with you and to get to know you, then they're more likely to get the inside information first and then feel connected to you in that way. Is that something that's applicable to Unity?
Yes, I mean,
Or is
Seth
that another bungler?
No, that's straight on. It sounds like Seth Godin said years ago, people like us do things like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's your tribe. This is how, if you're a deadhead like myself, it's like, this is what, if you're a parrot head like Jimmy Buffett fan, you do things this way.
Yeah.
So that's the ultimate goal. I mean, every marketer would want to have deadheads.
Yeah.
Or parrot heads to follow them, to buy everything about, or T-Rex heads. And that's a good thing to keep in mind, that kind of cohort. But you have to stick with it. It's not an overnight thing. It's just building up to attract people that think the way you do, that want the same outcomes that you do, see life in the way that you see it. Hey, we're all in this together. And that is the greatest influence. Kind of like with your family. It's easiest to get, you start up a blog. Who's the first one to get on your blog? Your mom. Your dad. Family is it. So how do you get something close to that with your own clan, to have that kind of family sort of feel? Very powerful.
Okay. And how do you pronounce his name again?
Cialdini, Robert Cialdini.
Okay. Is he still alive?
He is. In fact, I spoke to him. I knew him about 30 years ago. We're both psychologists. He was already legendary when I met him when it was 1989, 1990. But he wasn't legendary for that book. In fact, he said himself during a talk that he gave at that time, like, nobody's read this book. It was 5 or 6 years later, because he was a legendary researcher. Okay. But somebody came along, some digital marketer, somebody discovered that book and said, aha. And if you open that book up to the table of contents, what are the chapters? Reciprocity, authority, social proof, scarcity. Boom, they're right there. It's the table of contents. That's where it all comes from. So if you want to go back and read that source, that's a great way to do it. You can read his newest book that includes Unity. And then, of course, I also teach, kind of a summary of that for kind of a quick start to make sure that you understand how to use each principle. Yeah.
So commitment and consistency isn't necessarily part of his main principles, but in my eyes, as a social media coach and strategist, like, consistency is everything. And why is that not one, or why do you think that's not one of his?
Well, I'll say that it is one of his main principles. We don't see it so much because it's difficult to do in the digital world. I've seen it done many times from stage. It's almost scary when you see people use it because it's so powerful.
What's an example of it?
So you can think of it as commitment is kind of you think of foot in the door techniques. You get somebody to commit to a small request, and because they did that, well, you must be this kind of person, so you might commit to a larger request. All those contests that we used to do, I don't know, they probably still do them, like write 100 words why you love Doritos or something, we'll give you a prize. And you're like, well, why would you do that? Well, they're trying to get you to state in words so then they can sell you more. Why do they ask you if you're going to vote next month? Like, well, these are really silly, those silly polls you get. Are you for clean water? Yes or no? Are you for,
Mhm.
the whole point is to get you to commit, like, I'm going to vote next month, because they know once you have publicly stated something that you're far more likely to act on that behavior. So it's difficult to do digitally, but in a room from the stage, to get people to state things, even to trick them into stating things, to then say, hey, Sarah, you said this. What? Oh, I thought you were this kind of person. You said this. Why aren't you buying this product? And it puts enormous psychological pressure on people.
Yeah, it does.
To buy when you point out to them that they're inconsistent, because nobody wants to be inconsistent. They don't want to be a flip flopper or waffle.
Right.
And they're like, well, I guess I said that. And people will seriously they don't even believe in the product, but they're like, well, I guess I did say that. And then they'll follow through because of the great fear of not being consistent with what you stated publicly.
Yeah. But I also get really mad at those people. I get really mad at those people because I feel like it's a manipulation in the moment. And if I feel like I'm being pressured into the sale, then it makes me not want to do it even more. I guess depending on how it's done. But I have seen the techniques where you'll have a small sale. Like I just signed up for a webinar, and it was $27 to sign up for the 3-day webinar. And as soon as I said yes to that, because that was an easy yes, right after that, another screen popped up and it was like, oh, well, if you like that, then you'll really like this. And this is the $89 VIP. You get, access afterwards. You get to ask personal questions. Do you want this too? And I'm sure if I had said yes to that, there'd probably be another one that would pop up after that. They would say, well, if you like this, then maybe you want to do some one-on-one coaching with the team, So
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a great misuse. So there's a classic bungler. And this is what happens is the people who have been teaching this haven't read the book, because if you read the book, you would know that in fact is not the principle, like how they're using this, get more and more yeses.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand the principle, just like reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
If you're told, oh, you got to use reciprocity, first you give somebody a free gift, right? And I did this myself. I'm like, oh yeah, you put a free gift, and that's not reciprocity. That's not how it to the extent it works. Okay. It works for some reason, but that is not reciprocity. Is if here's a good example. Let's say you knew that my kids were at soccer practice and I was busy, and so you went and picked them up, and you give me a call and say, hey Matt, I just want to let you know I picked up your kids. I'll drop them off at school. Just thought I'd save you some time. What's my reaction? It's thank you, but then it's like, okay, Sarah, I'll pick up your kids tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'll do this next time. I feel this burden, this psychological burden that I owe you now because you did something that really saved me time, and now I feel like I owe you. Mm-hmm. Is that what happens on a free gift? You go to a free gift and you put your name and email, and you get the infographic or the PDF, and you go, oh my gosh, I'm so indebted. What can I do for you? Nobody has ever said that to you, because a free gift breaks all the rules. It is not reciprocity at all. So that's another great example of bungling, thinking that you're using the principle. But if you were actually using it, it would have that incredible urge, just like you doing me that great favor. It feels like I owe you. That's psychology going on that is completely absent in a free gift on a website.
Yeah. Yeah. But I also think it's because, in the moment, I'm not looking to get anything back from it. I'm just looking to help you, and if it comes back in some sort of way, that's great, but that's not the purpose of why I'm doing it.
That's right. That would be a detective. So now you're using, and of course you're not actually using it. It's just, that's who you are. You're a good-hearted person. You're doing somebody a favor. but you can see how this would put somebody else in a position of influence.
Yeah.
Just like the old, he gives a story. I don't know if they still do this. Back when I was a kid, Hare Krishnas would be in the airport with the flowers, and anyone that came by, they would get a flower. And that was an intentional reciprocity, because they found by just giving somebody something they didn't even want. In fact, they took the flower and then threw it in the garbage on the way out. And the Hare Krishnas knew that, because they would go through all the garbage bins and get all the flowers. But they knew just by giving something to somebody, even though they didn't want it, they didn't ask for it, there were plenty of people that would hand them $1. Reciprocity.
Yeah.
So it's so powerful that even something not asked for, you didn't even want, you still, you feel obliged to return the favor. So they were using it in a smuggler fashion.
Yeah.
And that's what we don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Well, now I feel like I need to go get the book Influence and go read it, because I'm like, well, how many of these have I been doing wrong? And
it's a matter of, and I was there myself, so I'm thinking I stepped into the digital marketing world. I'm a psychologist. I met Cialdini 30 years prior. I know that I taught this stuff in the university, yet I still did it. I still stacked the tactics because I was told that's how you do it.
yeah.
This is how you do it. It's completely different online. You need to do it in this way. And I fell for that, and I couldn't sell. I couldn't influence anybody. I was getting zero visibility. And then I'm like, it took I must be the slowest learner on the planet. It took me like 2 or 3 years to go, oh, wait a minute. I got up, blew the dust off my old book. I'm like, I'm doing this wrong. And so that's the message I want to give to folks is, if you feel that way, like you're not, getting your message out there, nobody's listening, it feels wrong, that's a great indicator. This feels icky. This isn't how I'd like to be sold to. It's because you're using the principles like weapons. It should feel wrong. That the psychological result of doing that, it should feel wrong. And when it does, to know you use the same principles, but you just use them correctly in an authentic way, and you get all the benefits of people hearing you, trusting you, believing in you. And if they're ready to buy, if this is the product, then they'll come to you. And if they don't, they'll still stay with you until maybe you have something else to offer them down the road.
Yeah, you'll get stalkers. It's the one time that getting stalkers is really good, is when you get the people who have been stalking you for months, years, and then finally something clicks with them and they're like, okay, yeah, no, I need to do this. Which, for me is the whole consistency part, is just showing up in service, good messages, lots of value, and knowing that it's going to come back to you. So,
yeah. And you don't want to do the opposite, which is what a lot of we're taught, is you hammer them with all of these, buy now, buy now, buy now, use the tactics, and you drive a ton of people away. And then what? You have to start all over. Then you have to bring in fresh people. You'll get a bunch, and then you'll drive the rest of the way. That might have been fine 10, 12, 15 years ago in the internet space. Not today. You need to hold on to people. You want the stalkers, and you want the people that are just staying in your orbit, and having that conversation with them over time. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so tell us how we can follow you. Tell us what your offers are. How do you want to work with people? Tell us all the things.
Probably the best place is go to a website called influencerconversations.com.
Okay.
So influencer, we all want to be influencers, but not, not the Hollywood, athlete influencers. You want to be able to use the principles of influence. So it's called Influencer Conversations. And I use that because it's an ongoing conversation with your folks. If you go to that site, there is a matrix of smugglers and detectives for people to identify where they are in that space. And it has a explainer video to kind of show you where you are. So that's a good place to start to see where you are. I know none of your audience are smugglers, but they might be on the muddling side or the bungling side.
Bungling side of it.
Yeah. And so you want to move towards being a detective. So the explainer video describes that. There's an assessment tool there that you can kind of self-assess where you are. And then there's also a basic training course that gives it just takes about almost 4 hours to listen to it. You can listen on double speed, I don't mind, but it goes through all 8 of the principles, shows how they're misused, how to use them, give you some good alternatives as well. So influencerconversations.com, probably the best place to start.
And I will have that down in the show notes. And then also, if you're on LinkedIn, go follow him on LinkedIn. You write some good articles over there. I really appreciated reading the one on the Chat GPT and the surveys that you put up recently, which is a whole different conversation, but really nice educational content if you go follow him on LinkedIn. Matt, it's been great chatting with you today. Thank you so much for visiting. I hope everybody gets a lot of value out of this and you turn into a detective in your influence and not just a bungler. Thank you so much.
That's right. You're welcome, Sarah. Thanks for having me on.